Welcome to Real Rockford Files, for tales of the paranormal, supernatural, and the flat-out unbelievable. Today I'm going to be sharing Ouija board and Seance stories. The things that you hope work, then you wish that they didn't. Now, let's get into it. Story 1. This happened a long time ago in my teen years. You know, the years when you're daring and reckless. However, I was the one who knew better during this particular event. My two best friends, I'll call them Dee and Val, wanted to have a slumber party. We had a previous one at Dee's house and had a lot of fun. This time, it would be at Val's house. We invited some of our other friends, 8 of us in total. We arrived at Val's house around 6 in the evening. Our mother ordered some pizzas and pop for all of us. We enjoyed that. From there, we went down to the basement where Val's parents fixed up the rec room to accommodate all of us with mats and sleeping bags. While down there, one of the girls told us about a trick of sorts that we could experiment with. One of you lies on the floor and the others gather around with one person at the head and feet. The person at the head leads it off, and this is so-and-so. She is dead, and everyone around them says the same thing. Then the lead person says she is light as a feather and stiff as a board, and each person chants with them. The last thing the lead says is she will rise and float like a feather. At that point, we all have 2 fingers of both our hands under the person and we begin to lift in unison. Guess what? It worked. Val was the one lying on the sleeping bag we lifted. The floor was too dirty, so she laid on a sleeping bag. She actually did float beyond our grasp and rise to the ceiling until her nose touched it. We were freaking and she opened her eyes and screamed. We all panicked and withdrew our hands shouting, "Catch her, catch her!" However, nobody was holding her and she fell from ceiling height. Wham! Fortunately, she landed on the sleeping bag with no injuries other than just being shook up. We were very intrigued by this. Actually, we were mystified. About then, Val and Dee, they are the main protagonists here, got the bright idea to have a Ouija board session. Val asked the girl that lived next door to go to her house and get her board. Apparently, this girl had one. About this time, I gave them all a great big, "Nope, not me." I told my friend Dee about the session my sister and cousins had a couple years before, and she was extremely intrigued by my account of what happened. I told her that I think it was dangerous and not a toy to be played with. They called me chicken. I told them, "That's right, I'm a chicken that knows better. I'm going home, but I'm warning you that you'll regret messing with that thing," and I bid them a good night. I gave my mom some lame duck excuse for coming home from the party. I told her that the pizza gave me an upset stomach. Unfortunately, I had to endure a spoonful of Pepto-Bismol, and then I went to bed. The next day, there was a knock on our door. It was Dee, looking very ashen and wide-eyed. She asked me to step outside so we could talk. While outside, she looked at me serious as a heart attack and told me what happened after I left. She apologized for calling me chicken and told me that I was absolutely right about warning them not to mess with that thing. They were asking us stupid questions like who was going to marry who and that kind of girl stuff, but then they asked questions they shouldn't have. They began receiving knocks in response to their questions. Right away, Val thought it was her older brother, but he was in the living room with the rest of the family watching TV when she went upstairs to check on him. They continued, even more intrigued than ever. However, they started getting unnerving answers and hearing strange noises. I'm only going by what Dee told me. They got scared and quit the session. They all climbed into their sacks and mats. That is when things started that they couldn't explain. Dee told me that it got incredibly cold down there, and they heard more knocking. They then began to hear something shuffling around them in a steady gait, but they didn't see anything. A couple of the girls yelped after being poked by unseen fingers. They were so scared that they began making a commotion that alarmed her mother to the point of running down to the basement to find out what was going on. When they told her mom what they did, she really read Val and the others the riot act. She told them that those things are not toys. She confirmed that they are dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. She told the girl that brought it to get it out of her house or she'd take a sledgehammer to it. The girl ran home and disposed of it. She was truly frightened. They didn't get much sleep that night. Dee told me that Val would be coming by also to apologize to me because I was right to caution them. Matter of fact, they all apologized to me. Quite humbly, I might add. I didn't hold it against them. Story 2. When I was in my early teens, I used to spend a few weeks each summer at my grandma's farmhouse out in the country. The house was very old, complete with a root cellar under the kitchen and a rickety staircase. The front part of the house was bright and airy and happy, but the back part was gloomy and creepy. We mostly used the back for storage and rarely went there. The house didn't generally have bad vibes, but I felt like the happy front part of the house was besieged by darkness lingering in the back and in the creepy root cellar underneath. I was never 100% comfortable there. One time my grandma was out grocery shopping or visiting a friend and I was left alone in the house. There weren't many kids my age in the tiny town, and I mostly had to fend for myself for entertainment. TV reception was terrible. This was back in the 80s, so I spent most of my time walking, reading, and doing crafts. To break the monotony, I thought that it would be fun to experiment with a Ouija board. I didn't have one on hand, and since I was alone, I didn't think it would work anyway. Then I recalled that a friend told me that instead of a Ouija, you could use a needle suspended over the alphabet drawn around a circle. The needle would supposedly move and point to letters in response to the questions. It didn't sound very legit, but I was bored and decided to try it. I drew letters around a circle and suspended a needle on a thread over it. The needle settled, pointing to the center of the circle. Thank you, gravity, and did not move again. But I wasn't going to give up that easily. I figured that if I rested the pin of the needle in the center and tilted the needle a little by lowering its top, I can get the top to spin around while the tip remained anchored in the center. Then the top was bound to settle, pointing to a letter. This time, I had the laws of physics on my side, so the needle did instead point to different letters each time I gave it a whirl. I'm sure I started with some silly questions about which boys liked me, and I'm sure I got some gibberish answers. It wasn't really working. I was ready to give up, but decided to ask what my profession will be when I grow up. The needle spelled the word shoe. It kind of freaked me out. I left the house and sat in the backyard until Grandma returned. Once back from summer break, I told my friends about what had happened. We all had a good laugh about me becoming a shoe. Several years went by and I had forgotten about the incident entirely. It all came back though when I found myself working in the shoe department at a large store. Story 3. A few years ago, I think it was around the 7th or 8th grade, we went on a school trip to Bad Tolls, Germany. From the beginning on, my best friend and I, who both tend to pick up on energies a lot more than most people, already felt something was just off about the place. But it really kind of escalated after we had a little seance in the forest that belongs to a place we stayed at. We asked the basic questions like if there was any spirits near us, and at some point, all of us started feeling like we were being touched. For example, on my neck, an ankle, or my friend's arm. A few minutes later, we noticed that those exact spots had turned bright red. We actually had photos of that, but since it's been so long, we all have new phones by now. We did end the seance properly, by the way, by all of us saying goodbye and thanking the spirit for talking to us. We'd already kind of started to get a little scared at that point, but it just got worse. After it got dark, my roommate and one of the people who had also taken part were brushing their teeth when they suddenly saw glowing red eyes in the mirror. So obviously we were even more terrified after that, but it still didn't stop there. We decided to sleep in the same bed after that. It was in the middle of summer, so we opened the window a little. At around 11:30 to midnight, the window suddenly slammed all the way open. There was no wind. The window was so heavy and difficult to move that we had to open it together. After that, we noticed a shadow in the corner, where no shadow should have been, because it was on the opposite side of the window. We even tried to debunk this afterwards, but the only things tall enough in the room were the bunk beds and a closet, none of which could have thrown a shadow like that. Needless to say, we were kind of traumatized after that night. I really don't know what happened that day or why it happened. Story 4. My home has an unair-conditioned basement that we use primarily for washing clothes and storage, and keeping the dogs occasionally. When it's not too hot or cold outside, I'll go down there sometimes at night to do group chats with my friends after my wife and kids have gone to sleep. One evening while down there, an old operation board game started making one of the noises over and over again. This was a version which had a funny sound for each of the organs to remove. It initially scared the crap out of me, but afterwards I laughed about it, and the guys on my group chat heard it too and laughed. It would do this randomly every so often for months at a time, using different sounds each time, over and over. I assumed that it was just the old board game slowly dying. My family all heard it as well. Later, we began finding evidence of a rodent in our basement. I caught glimpses of it out of the corner of my eye and assumed because of its size, speed, and ability to climb rapidly that it was a squirrel, as we had them in the attic. It did a good deal of damage, especially chewing up books or other research material, and we began to find nests all over the garage. We tried various means to get rid of it, including a variety of traps, poison, and a sound emitter. Nothing worked. We eventually saw the culprit, which turned out to be a very large rat, but we could never catch it. It was able to climb walls vertically as fast as a squirrel, much faster than a rat should have been able to. It seemed to be abnormally intelligent, like rats of Nim intelligent. It would get the bait from the traps without triggering them, and wouldn't eat the poison blocks. I put all the poison blocks in the rafters and ductwork to prevent the dogs from getting them. However, at some point, the rat pushed one of the blocks onto the floor, where one of the dogs found it, and we had to quickly take him to the vet to induce vomiting and ensure he was okay. He made a full recovery. During this same time frame, when I opened the basement door and turned on the light, I would notice a shadow in the shape of a person at the bottom of the stairs, just for an instant before vanishing. Not always, but sometimes. I could turn the lights off and on again and it would not reappear. I assumed it was some sort of electrical issue. My daughter finally encountered the rat in the basement and killed it with her softball bat. I got rid of it and cleaned out the basement, and we thought that was the end of it. Only another rat showed up in the next week or two and continued the damage and continued to elude death and capture. Eventually, I started to think outside the box, as I had never really put any of the three phenomena, the rats, the shadow, and the operation noises together, but realized they had all occurred during the same time frame. I noticed that my old Ouija board was directly beneath the operation game. I had not used it since high school. I researched Ouija boards and discovered that you are supposed to close sessions by moving the pointer to goodbye and not to store the pointer on the board. I had never done that, although the board had not been used in more than 20 years, and I had never had any real encounters with it, just pushed it around to scare other teenagers. That evening, when I went home, I took it down and opened the box, and sure enough, I had left the pointer on the board, which I reckon left the connection open for all those years, until something found it and used it. I quickly moved the pointer to goodbye, asking any presents to leave and not return and saying a prayer. I then stored the pointer in the box, separated from the board. A few days later, we found the dying rat in a drawer, poisoned, and after cleaning the basement out again, I've had no further rodent problems. The shadow stopped appearing at the bottom of the basement stairs as well, and the operation game stopped making noises. I don't have any concrete evidence or any real answers, but at this point my hypothesis is that something found its way through the open Ouija board and somehow managed to manipulate the board game, the rats, and manifest as a shadow at the bottom of the stairs. Our home has been saged, and I grow sage in our basement as well now. I've also done enough research to be able to respond if anything happens again. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to click like. If you want to support my channel, please share it with your friends. If you want to hear more, don't forget to subscribe.